Though Satoru's family brought Hachi up, it was as though Kosuke did the job half the time. Whenever he went over to Satoru's, he played tirelessly with Hachi, and Satoru sometimes took the cat over to Kosuke's house. At first, Kosuke's father stubbornly refused to let Hachi in the house, so they played in the garage, but before long, his mother let them bring the cat inside, if not into the studio, and little by little, his father got used to it. He warned them not to let Hachi sharpen his claws on the walls of the furniture, but sometimes, when he passed by, Kosuke's father would say a few nice things to Hachi. Kosuke regretted that he couldn't have Hachi himself, but he was very happy when his father played with him. It felt like his father was meeting him halfway. He even hoped that, if he ever found another stray kitten, this time he would be allowed to keep it for himself, because it was a very special thing to have your own cat in your own home. Whenever he stayed overnight at Satoru's, sleeping on the futon beside his bed, he'd often be woken in the early hours by 4 feet clumping over him. Feeling the weight of a cat's paws pressing into your shoulders in the middle of the night, not much beats that. He would glance over and see Hachi curled up in a ball on top of Satoru's chest. Perhaps, finding it too hard to breathe, Satoru, still asleep, would slide the cat beside him. Lucky guy, Kosuke thought. If he were my cat, we could sleep together and I would let him walk all over me. My father seems to have taken a liking to Hachi, and I'm thinking maybe if we find another stray kitten, he might let me keep it. That would be great. Then Hachi would have a friend. The idea made Satoru happy, and on the way to and from swimming club, he'd kept an eye out for another box with a kitten inside it. But there never was another cardboard box with a kitten inside left under the housing complex sign. Of course, it was a good thing that no more poor cats were abandoned, because even if they had found another cat, Kosuke's father still wouldn't have let him keep it. 2 years had passed since Hachi had gone to live at Satoru's. Kosuke and Satoru were now in the 6th grade of elementary school. As autumn set its leaves, their school organized a residential trip. 3 days, 2 nights in Kyoto. Kosuke could do without the temples, they all looked the same to him, but he was overjoyed to be staying away overnight with his friends, far from house, and having more spending money than he'd ever imagined to buy souvenirs with was exciting too. There were plenty of things he wanted to buy for himself, but he also had to remember to buy presents for his family. One day, when they were in a souvenir shop, Satoru had a worried look on his face. "What's wrong?" asked Kosuke. I'm wondering which one to buy." Satoru was looking at various kinds of fossil blotting paper on a cosmetics display. "Mom asked me to buy some blotting paper, but I've forgotten which brand she wanted." "Aren't they all the same?" Satoru didn't seem to know one way or the other, so Kosuke said, "Why don't you buy her a gift another time?" "Okay, I guess I'll get something for that." "Yeah, you should. I'll get something for my dad too." They wandered around a few shops, and Kosuke was the first to decide what to get. A good luck mannequin echo cat keyring, the cat with a banner on its back that read "Success in Business." Of course, there was an ulterior motive behind this choice. His father might begin to like cats. "Oh, that's great!" Satoru's eyes sparkled at the comical expression on the mannequin echo cat's face. "But we don't have a family business, so that slogan wouldn't work." "There's lots of others besides "Success in Business." Satoru figured that the 2 slogans on banners that made most sense for his father were "Health Come First" and "Road Safety." A third read "Harmony in the Home," but he wasn't exactly sure what that meant. Satoru ended up picking the keyring with the "Road Safety" banner because he thought the mannequin echo cat resembled Hachi. He hadn't bought the blotting paper for his mother, but said he'd look for some the following day. But after lunch the next day, Satoru was gone. When their class assembled, their teacher explained that Miyawaki-kun had to return home before us. "Ah, poor Satoru." His classmates all murmured to each other how sorry they were. They imagined themselves in Satoru's place, having to go home early. "Sawada-kun, do you know why?" Kosuke had heard nothing. Satoru had come home without saying a thing even to his best friend, so something very serious must have happened. And Satoru hadn't even bought the blotting paper for his mother. She'll be disappointed, Kosuke thought, when only his father gets a souvenir. That's it. Kosuke had a sudden flash of inspiration. I'll buy it for him. That whatchamacallit blotting paper. But how am I going to work out which brand he wants? As he was puzzling over this, their school group went on a visit to Kinkakuji, the temple of the Golden Pavilion. This glittery temple was unique, totally different from all the sober-looking ones they'd seen up until then. There were squeals of disbelief among the students when they saw it. Man, that's gaudy, was the consensus. If only Satoru could be here to see it, Kosuke thought, his heart aching. During their free time, a couple of girls in his class were hanging out in a souvenir shop, and when he spied them, Kosuke was struck by another flash of inspiration. The girls will know. Blotting paper is something girls use. Hey, Kosuke called over to the girls, who were twittering away to each other like a pair of chirping birds. Do you know a brand of blotting paper? It's supposed to be kind of famous. They both shot back to the same reply. You mean Yojiya? They have it in that store over there. The girls were about to head over there themselves, so Kosuke went with them. The cheapest blotting paper was over 300 yen, and thinking how much spending money he had left, Kosuke hesitated. But Kosuke felt sorry for Satoru, having to go home in the middle of the school trip, and he was Satoru's best friend. Satoru probably feels worse about not getting the gift for his mother than having to go home early, he thought, and Kosuke was the only one who understood that. He had no clue what was so special about this blotting paper, but he went ahead and bought a packet, with its distinctive drawing of a Kokeshi doll on the wrapping. The package was so thin and flimsy looking, he was doubtful that Satoru's mother would really want it, but that's what Satoru had decided on. Sawada-kun, did your mother ask you to buy Yojiya paper? Nope. Satoru's mother asked him, and he was searching for it in all the shops, but he went back without buying any. You're such a good guy, Sawada-kun, the girls guessed. It was not a bad feeling. Miyawaki's mom will love it. It's a famous brand. Is it really that famous? Kosuke was surprised, and at the same time relieved. He was convinced now that Satoru's mother would appreciate the gift, no matter how flimsy it seemed. I should have bought the same thing for my mother, he thought, but he'd already bought her a present the day before. Buying 2 presents for her would push him over the budget, and he could picture his father's face. He abandoned the idea. They arrived home on the evening of the 3rd day. I'm back. Kosuke held out the presents he'd bought and was about to tell his parents all about the trip when his father poked him. Stop messing around. But all he was doing was giving them their presents. The thought made him want to cry. His mother had a serious look in her eyes. Change your clothes. We're going over to Satoru's. Satoru had to leave early. Has something happened? His mother looked down, searching for how to put it, but his father didn't mind his words. Satoru's parents passed away. Passed away? The words didn't register, and Kosuke stood there blankly. They died, his father grunted. The moment Kosuke understood, the tears started to flow. It was as if a dam had broken. Stop your blabbering, his father said, poking him again, but the tears wouldn't stop. Satoru. My god. Kosuke had gone over to Satoru's just the day before they had left for their school trip. He had been playing with Hachi, and Satoru's mother had said, You have to get up early tomorrow for your school trip, so you'd better be getting home soon. You're welcome to play with Hachi anytime. Kosuke suddenly fell silent. It was a car accident. They swerved to avoid a bicycle that came out of nowhere. They missed the bike, but the 2 of them didn't make it. Today's the wake, so we should go. Kosuke changed into the clothes his mother had laid out for him, and the 3 of them set off. Just as they reached the bottom of the slope leading to the housing complex, Kosuke realized he'd forgotten something. You can get it later. He stood up to his father, telling them they could go on ahead, and finally managed to persuade him to give him the house key. What an idiot, he heard his father mutter as he trotted on. The wake was being held at the local community center. A couple of women dressed in black scurried around, and Satoru sat vacantly in front of the 2 coffins at the altar. Satoru, Kosuke called out. Satoru said, nodding. It was as if his mind was elsewhere. Kosuke had no idea what to say. "Here you go." Kosuke pulled out a thin paper packet from his pocket, the present he'd run back to fetch when his father had called him an idiot. "The blotting paper your mother wanted. It's Yojiya." Satoru burst into tears. He dropped his head while his small body shook with his sobbing. It was only later, when Kosuke had grown up, that he understood the full meaning of the word lament. A young woman came over quickly and huddled over him. She spoke in Satoru's ear, and from the way she was rubbing his back to comfort him, she seemed to know him well. "Are you a friend of Satoru's?" she asked. "Yes, I am," Kosuke replied, standing up straight. "Would you take him home so he can have a rest? This is the first time he's cried since he got back." Kosuke said he would. The woman's eyes, puffy from crying herself, broke into a smile. "Thank you," she said. Through the funeral, Satoru had sat rigidly next to the young woman. There were other people there who were apparently relatives, but they didn't seem so close to him. Satoru's classmates had gone too, to light incense and pray. All the girls sobbed, but Satoru had greeted them without shedding any tears himself. Kosuke was impressed by how Satoru had held up, but at the same time, it felt as if his friend had drifted away somehow and wasn't really there. If Kosuke were in Satoru's place, if his father, the one who had called him an idiot, and his mother had passed away at the same time, he knew he wouldn't be able to hold it together like that. Kosuke took Satoru by the hand and led him home. On the way, Satoru's words were broken up by tears. "The good luck charm for my father came too late, and I didn't get a present for Mom. Thank you for buying it." Only Kosuke could have worked out what he was saying, so incoherent with sobs were his words. When they got to Satoru's house, Hachi was waiting on that day's newspaper near the front door. He seemed unfazed by Satoru crying like an animal and padded towards the living room as if guiding them. When Satoru collapsed on the sofa, Hachi jumped up on his lap and licked Satoru's hands over and over. When they'd found Hachi, he'd been only a kitten, but now he seemed more grown up than Satoru. After the funeral, Satoru didn't come back to school. Every day, Kosuke would take homework over to his house, and they would play silently with Hachi for a while. Then Kosuke would go home. The young woman stayed at Satoru's house the entire time. It turned out she was Satoru's aunt, his mother's younger sister. Is he going to live with her here? Kosuke wondered. He would drop in on Satoru even on days when there was no homework to deliver. His aunt knew his name, greeting him with a "Hello, Kosuke," whenever he came by, but she was quieter than Satoru's gregarious mother, and the house now felt strange to him. "I'm going to move," Satoru said one day. The aunt was going to be Satoru's guardian, but she lived a long way away. Ever since Satoru hadn't come back to school, Kosuke had had an inkling that this might happen, but when it did, it felt as if a hole had opened up in his heart. He knew that whining about it wasn't going to change anything. He stroked Hachi as he lay curled up on Satoru's lap without saying a word. Today, too, Hachi was gently licking Satoru's hands. "But Hachi will go with you, won't he?" That way, Satoru wouldn't be so lonely. But Satoru shook his head. "I can't take Hachi with me. My aunt moves around a lot with work." And Satoru, too, looked like he knew that whining about it wasn't going to change anything. But that's just too much to bear, Kosuke thought. "What will happen to him? Some other relatives say they'll take him. Do you know them well?" Satoru shook his head. This made Kosuke angry. How could Hachi be taken in by people Satoru didn't even know? I'll ask if we can have Hachi at our place." Hachi had been looked after by Kosuke half the time anyway. If Kosuke could take care of Hachi, then Satoru could come to his place to see him. Even his father had shown an interest in Hachi whenever he visited, but his father's view hadn't changed a bit. "No way! A cat? Are you kidding? But Satoru's mom and dad are dead, and now if Hachi has to stay with people he doesn't even know, think how sad he'll feel." "He knows them, the relatives." Satoru said he doesn't know them. Distant relatives you hardly ever see are, to a child, like total strangers. Friends are much closer. Why don't adults understand that? "In any case, it wouldn't work. Cats live 10, 20 years sometimes. Do you want to take responsibility for it your entire life? Yes, that's pretty cheeky for someone who's never earned a penny in his life. His mother, perhaps thinking this was getting out of hand, stepped in on Kosuke's side, but his father still wouldn't budge. I feel sorry for Satoru, his father went on, but these are two different things. Go and tell him you can't do it. There was no way a sixth grade boy was going to make him change his mind, so Kosuke headed towards Satoru's, crying fat tears all the way. His legs felt like lead as he climbed up the slope from the bottom of the housing complex. When they had first found Hachi, Satoru had done everything he possibly could to enable Kosuke to have him. His attempts had been misguided, but he had given it his all, done his very best. And the upshot was that Hachi had gone to live in Satoru's house. I'm so sorry, Kosuke said, still crying, his head on his chest. My dad said I can't have him. Damn you, Dad, don't you see what Satoru means to your son? It's okay, Satoru said, smiling through his own tears. Thank you for asking. On the day Satoru moved, Kosuke was there to see him off. Unbelievably, Kosuke's father came with him. Of course I'm coming, his father had said, since we know Satoru so well. Seeing his best friend off before he moved away, Kosuke had never felt such deep contempt for his father. At first, the boys exchanged letters and phone calls frequently, but as the days passed, the calls and letters naturally became less regular. One reason for this was Kosuke's shame at having shirked his duty towards his friend by not taking Hachi in. If they had been able to see each other from time to time, their closeness would have eased his sense of awkwardness, but as they were not able to meet, time only made his feelings of guilt grow. However, they never stopped sending each other New Year cards. They always included a brief note saying that they should get together sometime, and they continued through high school and on into college, but the intervening years in which they hadn't seen each other made it all the harder to arrange to meet again. At the Adults' Day ceremony, all Kosuke's old classmates were reunited to celebrate their turning 20. Many who now lived outside the prefecture came back especially, but Satoru wasn't among them. Where was he attending his Adults' Day ceremony? Kosuke wondered. Kosuke and his classmates must have had fun at the ceremony, because afterwards, for a while at least, they continued to get together on various occasions. It was still a bit soon for a high school reunion, but it was just the right time to wax nostalgic about elementary and junior high school days. Kosuke, who still lived in the prefecture, was put in charge of organizing the elementary school reunion. It was decided that all his sixth grade classmates should be invited. As he was in charge, he decided to send an invitation to Satoru. Satoru phoned in reply. His voice had not changed. Though they hadn't talked in years, their conversation was as lively as if no time at all had passed. Satoru rattled on, as if making up for all the years of silence. It was fun talking to you again. Well, see you, Satoru said, and hung up. Moments later, he called again. He'd forgotten to mention the class reunion. Of course he would come. After this, they kept in touch more regularly. Satoru was living in Tokyo, but now that they were adults, distance wasn't so much of an obstacle. Satoru graduated from a college in Tokyo and got a job in the city. Kosuke graduated from a nearby college and found a job locally. It was 3 years ago now that Kosuke had taken over his father's photographic studio. Even after Kosuke had grown up, he and his father didn't get on, and when his father's health failed, he set up shop and moved to the countryside a short distance away. He was from a family of local landowners, so he had various plots of land in the area. For a time, his father kept the photo studio closed, but after a while, keeping it at all seemed like too much trouble, so he decided to sell it off. He'd often announced his intention to do this, but even so, it made Kosuke a bit sad. He'd been around photos ever since he was a child. His father, hot-tempered and overbearing most of the time, became cheerful and kind when teaching him about photography, and once he'd even given him an old camera. Kosuke had picked up a lot of old photography, or at least his father's version of it, and when he was older, he had helped out occasionally with photo sessions at the studio. It was only through photography that he and his father had got along, which meant that now that their connection with photography had ended, their relationship could only get worse. And Kosuke couldn't bear that. He talked things over with his wife and urged on to by the fact that his own job wasn't going well. He told his father not to sell off the studio, but to let him take it over. His father was unexpectedly overjoyed and nearly burst into tears. Ah, even this late in the game, maybe this would make a change for the better. At least that's what I thought. Kosuke almost spat the words out. Did you two have a bad argument or something? Satoru asked anxiously. What with my father being so arrogant and selfish, maybe shouldn't have tried so hard to be a good son. After he had reopened the photo studios, his father still interfered, turning up and meddling. He'd give his opinions on how to run the place, what direction the business should go in, and generally boss Kosuke around. On top of this, he'd make inappropriate remarks to Kosuke's wife. You'd better have a child soon, so there'll be some to take over the studio, he told her. Kosuke and his wife were having trouble conceiving, and this was causing them a lot of stress. Kosuke's mother would sometimes warn her husband to watch his tongue, but hearing candid advice from his wife only made him more obstinate, a condition he never seemed to outgrow. Finally, Kosuke's wife conceived a child that had been last year. But during the first trimester of the pregnancy, when things were touch and go, she had a miscarriage. His wife was deeply upset, and she found the words his father spoke in an attempt to comfort her extremely hurtful. Well, he said, at least we know now you can have children. Kosuke was incensed. Why is this man my father? I don't know how many times since I was a child I have felt this way about him, ever since the day he rejected Hachi. After that, my wife went back to her parents' place. Her parents, naturally, were furious. Even if I tried to apologize, they don't want to listen. His father showed no remorse at all. Young woman, these days are so touchy, was all he could say. Sometimes I just wish he'd drop down dead. Kosuke blurted this out as if to himself, and quickly apologized. Sorry about that, he added. Perhaps he'd inherited this insensitivity from his father. The idea appalled him. Don't worry about it, Satoru said, smiling. There are all kind of parent-child relationships. I never wanted my parents to die, but if I'd had other parents, I don't know how I would have felt. If your father had been my father, Kosuke, I don't know if I would have been able to love him. He burst out, laughing. Some people really shouldn't become parents. There is no absolute guarantee when it comes to the love between a parent and their child. This was an unexpected view, coming from Satoru. I hope your wife will come back soon, he added. I don't know. It's not just her father-in-law she's upset with. She must be disgusted with her husband, who had never been able to stand up to his father. Kosuke had a habit of swallowing whatever he wanted to say. Repeated patterns of childhood behavior have long-term consequences. All Kosuke ever did was mumble ineffectually about the ridiculous things his father said in that high-handed tone of his. Does your father still really meddle that much? And we don't have as many customers this day either. People weren't going to photographic studios on special occasions like they used to. It was all part of the changing times. But Kosuke's father blamed it on his son. He thought he was spineless, and he started interfering even more, saying he needed to take charge of the business again. And still, Kosuke could never bring himself to stand up to his father and argue back. Me, on the other hand, I'm not like that. If things aren't good, I have no problem saying so, because cats are creatures that can't say so. And the idea of being taken into the home of a man because he hoped that his wife, who likes cats, would be tempted back, I swear, with all the feline dignity I can muster, this gets a definite no from me. I wonder if Nana's finally got used to it here. Kosuke stood up from the sofa and knelt beside my basket, placing his hand gently on the top. Just try it. Try pulling me out by force from this basket, and I swear I'll scratch so many lines on your face you'll be able to play checkers on it for the next 3 months. Chi. Kosuke made friendly little sounds and stuck his hand into the basket. I hissed and bared my teeth. Yep, that's off limits. Cross that line and, believe me, you'll live to regret it. He still doesn't seem to want to come out. Kosuke withdrew his hand. Um, doesn't look like it's going to work. You know, Satoru began hesitatingly. If you're going to get a cat, I think it might be better if you and your wife find a new one together. What do you mean? If you take my cat, it will be like you're getting back at your father for Hachi. I'm sure he doesn't even remember rejecting Hachi, but you do. At this, Kosuke fell silent. I'm not denying that Kosuke wanted to take me for the sake of their friendship, but I wouldn't let him deny either that taking me, with my resemblance to Hachi, would have something to do with ghosts of the past. Neither would I let him maintain that it had nothing to do with his wife having left him because of that difficult father of his. I think it would be good if you and your wife got a brand new cat, Satoru said. One with no strings attached. Kosuke put it like a child. I loved Hachi. I really wanted to adopt him back then. They look similar, but Nana is his own cat. He's not Hachi. But you felt it was fate when you met Nana because he looks like Hachi, didn't you? If you were fated to have Nana, then it should be my fate too. Yes, humans. Even when they grow up, they just don't get things. Makes me sick. My Hachi died back when I was in high school. Your Hachi, Kosuke, is still alive. That's right. Satoru, in his mind, had already laid Hachi to rest and moved on. So Hachi's place and my place were different. But that's not true of you, is it, Kosuke? You know in your head that Hachi is dead, but emotionally you can't accept it, right? If you don't mourn a dead cat properly, you'll never get over it. Even if you feel able to mourn the death of a cat you've heard nothing about for years, it's a little late to feel truly sad about it, isn't it? One other thing. You want me to replace Hachi, Kosuke? Up until now, Satoru has loved me as Nana, but now you expect me to be Hachi's stand-in? Not going to happen. And even worse is your troublesome father and wounded wife being added to the mix. I am an exceptionally wise cat, but there's no way I'm going to be part of that drama, burdened with all those depressing human relationships as they fondle me. It's more than I want to take on. You and your wife should find a new cat and make him your own. Leave your father out of it. He might complain, but just ignore him and get a cat, if that's what you want to do. Kosuke didn't reply, but he looked like he finally understood. So when he stuck his hand inside the basket again, I allowed him to stroke me, as a kind of farewell gift. It's about time you cut the strings and got over your father. Cats, you know, are independent from their parents 6 months after they're born. Satoru put me and my basket back into the silver van. He stood on the pavement talking with Kosuke. He seemed reluctant to say goodbye. Oh, by the way, Satoru said, slapping his forehead as if remembering something. In the city, they have photographic studios that take photos of pets, and they're really popular. There are more people than you'd think who want to have cute photos of their pets. Kosuke seemed quite keen on the idea. Have you had professional photos taken of Nana? Satoru smiled mischievously. Not yet, but if the Sawada studio becomes a pet studio, then maybe I will. Kosuke broke into a smile. It would be fun to hurl a new business idea in my father's face, too. Satoru was now in the van. He went down the window. One more thing, he had said to Kosuke. When I was 20, you invited me to a class reunion, remember? Oh, that old story, Kosuke laughed. It made me so happy. Why are you bringing that up now? Because I don't think I ever told you how happy it made me. Oh, stop, Kosuke said, trying to change the subject. I won't, Satoru said jokingly. Thank you. I never thought I'd get the chance to come back to this town. Satoru finally drove off. Sorry, Nana, Satoru said, turning towards me in the back seat. I thought it was better for him to get his own cat than to take you, but I'll find someone to have you, someone I can trust completely. No worries, I mean, I didn't ask you to do this in the first place. If you had forced me to stay there, things would have been pretty terrible for you and Kosuke, you know? By that I mean half a year's worth, perhaps, of checkered boards of your faces. Satoru glanced at me in the back seat, where I was now sitting in a tidy ball, my tail around my front legs. He let out a yelp. Nana, how did you get out? Didn't you know that lock on the basket doesn't work very well and it's easy peasy to unlock it from the inside? So you can open it. I had no idea. I'll have to buy a new one. You find out I can open the basket and that's all you can say? Even that day when you took me to the one place I never ever want to go, the vet, I didn't try to run away. On second thoughts, maybe there's no need. Even if you've known how to get out all along, you still listen to me. Exactly. Satoru should be thankful I'm such an exceptionally bright cat. I stretched up, placing my front paws on the passenger window, and enjoyed the passing scenery for a while, then curled up on the seat. Some kind of rock music was playing on the car radio, and the bass sounds vibrated in my stomach. Not exactly my thing. Cats have their own preferences when it comes to music. Did you know that? I pressed my ears down and waved my tail around in an attempt to make my feelings known to Satoru. It didn't take him long to understand. Oh, I see. You don't like this. What's on the stereo? I wonder. Satoru switched to the car stereo and a light orchestral melody started playing. Okay, this wasn't so bad. My mother used to like this. Paul Moriat. Not bad at all. I could picture doves about to fly off, a happy vision from the feline perspective. I never knew you liked cars so much, Nana. If I'd known, I would have taken you to all kind of places. Saying I like cars is a little inaccurate. Aren't you sort of forgetting that a car broke my leg? I just like this silver van, that's all, 'cause it was mine even before I met Satoru. Okay, so whose place are you going to take me to next? After Kosuke had waved off Satoru and Nana, he went back inside and found a text on his phone. It was from his wife. Did you take the cat? He was about to reply, but decided to call instead. He had a feeling that this time she might answer. The phone rang 7 times, Nana's lucky 7. Hello? His wife's tone was flat and a little distant. Now it was up to Kosuke to cheerfully, delicately soften that hard voice. I was thinking, he said evenly, what about if the two of us got our own new cat?